it's not just going, I did this and I did this and I did this and we did this and we did this, we did this and we came up with this product. It's telling an effective journey of the process that you've gone through and telling the story of a user using the product and what kind of end goal they get and what success they get from it and how it solves their frustration and pain point in a very effective way. And that's really where storytelling comes into play. Anyone can go out and say, I did research, I spoke to the stakeholder, I did a survey, I did this, I did this. A client is not going to be interested in that. They want to see how this solves problems for their users.
Hey everybody, welcome to UX Gorilla's Master Series. Our goal with this show is to help you gain new perspectives, tools, strategies and mindset for a successful career as a user experience designer. We are inviting some of the smartest experts from different industries around the world and learn about the path they took, the challenges they faced and learnings they had to help you accelerate your own journey. Alright, our guest today is Amit Patel, who is the Managing Director of Experience Haus, which is dedicated to delivering affordable education and spaces to aspiring UX designers in London. Prior to starting his own school in 2017, Amit had taught UX for 5 years. He was the lead UX instructor for General Assembly and had consulted startups from diverse domains. While it is not uncommon to find UX practitioners with a background in engineering or graphic design, Amit had a formal training in mathematics. Driven by his own curiosity to create digital solutions, Amit started his UX career. In past, he has worked in diverse industries from startups in areas such as media, fintech, transport to industry-leading companies such as Scotiabank, OVO Energy and Crossrail, which is Europe's largest construction project. Currently, apart from running Experience Haus, Amit builds products for health industry. He has an intense experience in product management, something that has given him a deeper understanding of both the end users and the business goals. He started his own school in 2017 after he saw a lack of affordable design education in London. From then on, Experience Haus grew very quickly and successfully under Amit's leadership. As of August 2018, Experience Haus proudly became a part of the Method of Form group. Apart from the trainings in UX, Experience Haus today has courses on digital marketing, product management, front-end development and influencer marketing. Amit's mentoring style is very hands-on and that is apparent in the way he has structured the curriculum at Experience Haus. His focus is not just on the theory but also on the industry experience. His students work on real-life projects to implement everything they learn at Experience Haus. Purely focused on value addition, Amit has ensured that his school has something to offer to even those who are not the students at Experience Haus but want to learn. Experience Haus today conducts regular meetups, workshops and conferences to bring industry experts in front of the aspiring designers, marketers and product managers. Amit now is focused on making more impact around the globe and has a great vision for Experience Haus. He is here with us today. Let's welcome him. Hey Amit, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So, Amit, you have a very interesting background, and let's start from there. So, how did your journey into UX begin?
Well, during my career, I've always worked kind of in business process, systems analysis type of work. Especially in construction, you're trying to build products or find ways of increasing margins. When I first started designing applications and web applications, there were no such things as smartphones, for example. So we were designing things that developers would just go off and build in a very kind of waterfall way of working. Yeah, and those were the first kind of early times when I was working on applications that were going to be very useful for the construction industry. Eventually, once the smartphone came out and we realized that there's much more of a need for much more user-centric design and approach to the UI, that's really when things started going into kind of the user experience side of things. I've always had an interest in, I'd say, print and graphic design, in coding. So even when I was university, I was doing a lot of web development, which was some taught through the university and some taught through myself. But just gradually, as kind of my career has taken off, and as kind of, especially since the smartphone has really taken off, that's when my interest in kind of doing more user-centric design came about.
Awesome. So, how did you learn UX? Like when there were lack of resources or when there was no internet, no smartphone. So, how did you started learning UX?
So a lot of it was, especially by working with developers and gathering, gathering requirements and going out and doing user research and speaking to a lot of people. That early part of that design process was, a lot of it was just taught on the job to me. I don't think it's particularly complicated to understand who you need to go and speak to and how to find people, the right people to speak to, the right stakeholders to speak to. A lot of the more finer details around, say, information architecture or usability testing, I learned by taking short courses online and going to workshops in person in London, and picking up things that way. And a lot of it has kind of just developed by getting involved in lots of different projects along the way. But yeah, a lot of it at early stage was, gathering requirements for applications and projects that we needed to build. And now a lot of that was by researching with the right people within the organization, which kind of led to, okay, this is now going to start to form the basis of what we need to go off and build. And then getting feedback once something's built, getting feedback and showing it to people and realizing what works and doesn't work, allows you to tailor what that final design is going to look like. So you get a better understanding of kind of the true user experience behind it.
Right. So you mentioned something which is very interesting. You said that you knew how to talk to the right kind of stakeholders and you went inside the organization to do the research. So if you have to tell someone that, this should be the process while, let's say, you are building a new product or you are building a new feature, how do you think one should identify these stakeholders, and what are the kind of questions that one should be asking these stakeholders to make sure that they are developing something that's just not for the users, but also for people who are inside the organization and, it helps business?
Obviously, the types of questions you'd be asking, it will really depend on industry to industry and the type of person who you're talking to. But I like to look at the role of a designer as almost a facilitator. You're never going to know everything about a company. You're never going to know everything, at least to start with, about business objectives. You're never going to know everything about, even what kind of questions you have to go and ask. But you need to have a starting point. You need to have high-level goals, some questions for each of those high-level goals for your starting set of questions, and then go off and try things and go and find those people along the way. Ask those people, who else should I be speaking to? Start with someone. You've got to just start with somebody, get some of your assumptions out of the way, find out who else they can recommend that you need to speak to, and identify gaps from your questions. Every project is going to be so different that it's not going to be the same thing over and over. So who you need to speak to can really depend on the kind of questions you really need to spend, but you need to kind of go and find out at least one key person and set up your questions with kind of high level goals in mind of what you're trying to get out from that research session, and then start from there. One of the best things I think about being a designer is that every project is so different, and there'll be different challenges, and you will only get better at figuring out those challenges as you get more exposure to more projects.
Right. That's a wonderful input. So looking back, do you think there is something that you could have done differently, or let's say if you have to advise yourself from that time, what would be the thing that you want to change, or what would be your advice to yourself?
I don't regret anything at all. I've really enjoyed my career. I've really enjoyed the people. I always think that all of that has led to what I'm doing now, which I really do enjoy. And I think the only thing that I would change is that I would document my work a lot better. I've worked on a lot of projects. I wouldn't say, and everything is kind of documented, but it's all over the place. And
Right.
so if I ever had to create a portfolio, it would take me a long time to put it all together.
Right.
Something I tell the students now as well is, document along the way, because it is important, especially for your first couple of roles. After that, it's less so about the portfolio, because you're probably going to be in a more of a management or a leadership role and less doing hands-on work. But I would still like to have that portfolio now.
Right. That's true. I think when we are working on something, that time we are more focused upon shipping it, and anything that anything that feels like something that will take away the focus or will require time, we just postpone it. And yes, like sometimes your memory can remember only so much, right? So we don't then remember that what was the thought process. So it's obviously very hard to then document it. So coming to the part where you said that now you teach your student, and that's when I would like to know from you that how did teaching happen for you? Why did you start teaching?
I was working at a startup in London, and I was teaching assistant at General Assembly for a user experience design course. And I really enjoyed that, but I didn't really think that I was going to do that forever. I mean, I was just going in between work and teaching assistants in the evenings and sometimes during the day. And a couple of months later, I was asked to come and teach an evening class, a product management evening class, to step in for an instructor who was away. Or it was a user experience design course, I can't remember now. And that I really enjoyed teaching that evening class. And it's the first time I'd kind of led the whole class on my own. And that was maybe 2-3 years ago. But then 3-4 years ago, I can't remember. And that kind of led to doing more teaching. So kind of doing more regular things, more teaching assistant roles. And then eventually I was asked by General Assembly to lead my own user experience design course.
Wow.
And I started from that. And then maybe like 6 months later, they asked me to join on their full-time courses as designer in residence. And I did that. And then I became the full-time instructor on their 10-week program. And I was teaching part-time and boot camps. So I was doing a lot of teaching.
Right.
And then, but also doing a bit of freelance work as well. So there's still freelance work coming in and big projects. So I was kind of, doing quite a bit. And then I was offered a contract at Crossrail 2, and it was taking a while to just sort out some of the paperwork. But during that time, I started thinking about launching Experience Haus or doing my own school. And that's kind of led to Experience Haus.
Right. Could you tell us more about how a typical classroom experience is like at Experience Haus? Like how are the students learning? What is the teacher of the student to teacher ratio? And what are the kind of projects that these students are working on?
So the last course that just finished last week, we only take 8 students at a time.
Wow.
So it's a very tight-knit group, which allows for much better mentoring and kind of discussion for everyone to be able to speak up. A typical 2-hour class will be a quick recap of last week, any questions that people are having around their projects. Could be difficulty getting in touch with a stakeholder, not finding the right people to interview, things like that, or whatever it is based on the work that's been done so far. It will start off with a lecture. So it's very much I do. So as a teacher, we'll do a lecture. Then the class will break into workshop time and do it together with the teacher guiding it, essentially. And then there'll be a homework assigned as well. So it's a 2-hour session. The homework will then be applied to that final project, which is based on the real startup. And you're taking into consideration everything that you've learned on that day and then applying it to say, right, I'm now going to do this for my project. And over the 10 weeks, you're building up your project. At the end, you actually have to, the clients come in and you present it back to them. There's a formal presentation. The types of projects really are different. We look for, I speak to each student before they start the course to kind of find out what things they're interested in. what kind of projects they might be interested in, something that's different from their normal everyday work. We've been doing quite a bit of stuff in sports and medical. We've done stuff with the recruitment company. So this is the last group of 8. There was medical, there was health and getting people active. There was recruitment. There was another coding development school that got a portal developed or designed rather. There was a influencer marketing piece of software that uses AI that was designed as well. They're really big, different startups. Yeah, stepping away from just strictly UX and infusing more of a product management and really business side to the course as well, because that was something I felt was a major missing point of these UX courses, is that it's generally quite easy to go and create a good experience for something, but there's a complete lack of thinking about business objectives and where this thing can actually be sustainable based on those objectives. So that's why I also wanted to put in a bit of product management into the course and find real startups. The students are working on real projects, no more hypothetical projects, because otherwise you're designing without thinking about constraint. And that's not the right way to learn how to design, because you never design with unlimited budget, with unlimited technology, and all of that. So now we're doing lots of different courses.
So far, you have taught so many students, first at GA and now at your own school. So what are the common mistakes that you see many young designers make early on in their career? How do you think they can avoid them?
Well, we live in a world now where education is so easy to come across. There's workshops, there's online, there's free, there's Udemy, there's YouTube. There's so much content out there. There's so many ways to learn something. It can be a bit overwhelming, but what I find is that a lot of people are, two things I notice are people are going to a lot of conferences, workshops, meetups, and then just seeing what someone's done and then trying to apply it themselves. And just because you've seen a book or read an approach or seen how someone's done something in a case study at a meetup doesn't mean that you can immediately apply that to your work. Every project's very, very different. The second thing is rushing. A lot of people want to rush into these kind of careers. I mean, we go to degree programs for 3 or 4 years. We go to, school for a long, long time. And this kind of thing can take a while to get. It's exciting. It's fun work, but it can take a while to get a right skill set and right understanding of tools and methods. So there's no need to rush. Just because you do a 1-week course, 10-week course, there's still a lot of learning. I'm still learning things every day as well. So I think you just sometimes have to slow down a little bit.
I think that's an amazing insight, Amit. And what will be the key skills that you think every UX designer should have, like according to what is happening now?
Well, to me, when I'm looking at who I believe would be a good designer, or more importantly, somebody I would work with, it's not so much about the technical skills. I personally don't, those are things that can be taught. It's communication, it's empathy, presentation skills, I think are super important. That's why I kind of get the students to really, especially in the longer format courses, presenting, being able to articulate your ideas, present your ideas, sell your ideas. Storytelling is super important as well. The facilitation of workshops is an important skill. Yes, knowing how to do user research is great. Knowing how to do quick sketches and wireframes is great, but those are things that can be really taught along the way. But those softer personal skills are super, super important to be able to work with somebody, especially if you're leading a team or leading a workshop. And those are things that are just a bit more difficult to pick up and take time. That's why I also experience a lot of our workshops are catered around developing those personal skills and adding them to the technical skills that we teach. We also teach stuff like how to build unstoppable teams, how to use influence in reading people, and storytelling and presentation skills and negotiation and things like that are just super useful skills that separate you from just being somebody who's a technical person.
Right. those of us in the audience who do not understand what storytelling is and why it's important for UX designers, could you please explain that?
Well, when you're presenting a product, you're presenting a product that's going to be used by users. If you want to use a persona, for example, and you've got to pitch that story to a client, to an investor, of how this particular product solves a problem for those types of people. And you're going to do that through an effective way of telling a story, painting a picture of the frustration and pain point that somebody's facing at the moment, and how this product can solve that, why it solves that, why it's effective at solving that, and why this client or VC or whatever should be able to take it on and do something with it. And that it's not just going, I did this and I did this and I did this and we did this and we did this, we did this and we came up with this product. It's telling an effective journey of the process that you've gone through and telling the story of a user using the product and what kind of end goal they get and what success they get from it and how it solves their frustration and pain point in a very effective way. And that's really where storytelling comes into play. Anyone can go up and say, I did research, I spoke to the stakeholder, I did a survey, I did this, I did this. A client is not going to be interested in that. They want to see how this solves problems for their users. And you have to paint that through a very nice story.
Right. So could you give us a structure or maybe a pointer, maybe some pointers or maybe a process through which somebody can build a story around a product?
Well, a very simple thing, and I, especially if I'm presenting something or if I'm telling the students to present something, is just before you start going through, say, a wireframe or prototypes, is to paint the picture of the frustrations that are currently in place by your user.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you can do an effective way of saying, this is the core problem that they're having, this is where they're currently solving that problem, this is the product that we created to solve that problem for them. Okay. And then going through the journey of how they would interact with that product and what outcome they get from it. It's not a difficult framework, but just simply as doing that will effectively tell you the story of how a user can use this product to solve their problem.
Wow. So basically start from the frustration and then, work your way from there and realize that what will be the outcome that you want them to feel or what will be the emotion that you want them to feel and then frame the whole story around that.
Yeah, you ultimately want your products to be successful and to provide value. And you need to be able to tell the story of how that happens for your user as they use that product.
I think this could be such an effective tool. Also, like one thing is when you're selling it to your end users, but this is something that is such an important tool even when you're selling your usability testing proposal to the stakeholders or something, that's even for the internal stakeholders. You can use these things to sell your idea, and this has a lot of value, definitely.
Of course, it's all about knowing your audience. That's a lot of what presentation and storytelling is all about. It's about knowing who am I presenting this to. If I'm presenting to an internal thing, maybe I need to tell the story a little different. If I'm telling it to an investor, I need to talk about scale and revenue and then how many users are potentially going to use this thing. So absolutely, but being able to present that confidently and standing up and doing that is a core skill set. You could have an amazing product. You could create something amazingly for your portfolio. But as soon as you go into an interview or as soon as you stand up in front of a crowd and have to present it and you're nervous and you're not confident about it, it won't come across very well.
That's true.
And then the whole thing goes out the window. So you are the master at that moment. Everyone there is listening to the way that you've designed this product, and you have to be super confident in that. Again, that's not a technical skill. That's something that has to be developed over time. It is difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something that more you practice. In fact, more you practice, more you know about your own vulnerabilities, and more you will get feedback on it. So definitely, you can improve over time. So I meet a lot of designers during conferences and during meetups, and the one most common question is that they are currently, let's say, they're UI designers or they are graphic designers, and now they want to transition into UX design, and they actually do not know what the life or what are the job roles of a UX designers or whether or not they will make a good UX designer. So what do you think that process of assessment should look like? Like, what are the kind of questions that they can ask themselves to make that decision whether or not to take up UX as a career?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of graphic designers that come on our course, and who have transitioned into UX roles. And what even yesterday I was teaching a workshop, just an introductory to product design workshop last night, and a few people are asking about that. And I said, well, the best thing really to do in that case is go and find somebody who's gone through that transition themselves. They're the best ones to answer that for you. What were their frustrations? Why did they look at that as a potential career? What challenges did they face? What was their process of going through that? Because I could give you my opinion, but ultimately you want to find somebody who's in that exact position as you, who's already gone through it. I can guide you on that. There'll be lots of people giving you advice, but you want to find someone who's really gone through that. And so I always, and even if it's somebody that comes, like yesterday we had a couple of architects or one architect who wants to go into digital product. I said, well, okay, great. What I'll do is I will go into the network of people I've taught who've gone through that transition, and you can be introduced to them and you can understand what they felt and went through when they went through that transition.
Let's say somebody is interested in having an internship, but they don't have any industry experience, or they don't have any project to show. In that case, how can they build their portfolio, or what can they do to show their expertise? So what should be their strategy?
Yeah. In that case, you have to be able to be picking up self-initiated projects, side projects,
Right.
working with somebody else on a hypothetical project, whatever it is. You've got to be able to. It's another thing that I strongly look at in a lot of people is that are they self-starters? Are they self-initiated? Like, will they go off and work on things on the side just to get better at their own projects? And the people that are really kind of pushing themselves forward. And that is ultimately, those are things that can go into a portfolio. At least you can talk through the process that you've gone through on those projects. But if you don't have anything like that, why should anyone, and you have to ask yourself, why should anyone give you an opportunity if you have really nothing to show? We live in a world where there's lots of opportunity for you to go off and start learning and putting together something on your own to say, like, I am really interested in learning this. Here's something I've done in my own spare time. At least one or two projects like that should not be difficult to come up with.
Yeah, so this is a very good approach, that somebody can do a self-initiated project. But when I tell them that many times students start doing these redesigns, which are becoming now becoming very irritatingly popular, that everybody is doing a redesign of, let's say, Instagram or Facebook. How do you think, even if somebody has to do a redesign of an existing website, what do you think they should be doing while they're doing it? Like, what should be their process? Even if they do not know a lot about the business goals, but still, what are the things that they can do to still make an impactful impression?
Well, yeah, that's not always going to be there, but really all you're doing is just making a piece of art. You're just kind
Right.
of creating something that looks different than the original. But what I would do then is to start differentiating yourself, is maybe starting to look at some more emerging technologies to start implementing, say, a chatbot into the design, or looking at like conversational UI or something like that. So that, or wearable technology. So say I'm taking on this current Instagram thing, but I'm going to create a new feature so that it can be used on a wearable technology or something like that. That then is like starting to think more about the experience side behind things.
Right. So, when your students are graduating from the course, and let's say they have two options: either they can pick up a freelance, they can pick up a lifestyle as a freelancer, or they can have a full-time job. What is your advice to them? What should be the set of questions, or how should they assess whether a freelance career is better for them, or should they go with a company?
Well, I mean, freelance is great, but you need to have some good experience to go and do that. If you don't have good experience, then yeah, it's very, very tricky, because you'll be freelance, you're brought in to do a specific role. You've got to be very good and experienced at that, and you will learn more on that role as well. So I always recommend most people, unless they're already quite comfortable in what they're doing and they're freelancing and whatever they're doing, and they're comfortable showing what they've done, then that's okay. But the most people, it's like, go and find a role in a company, in an agency, whatever it is, for a couple of years to build up that solid grounding of work before you think about freelance. Freelance is a great goal. I always recommend to people that's something you should be looking forward to, especially work-life balance, but you need to be very experienced in that across different disciplines, different domains, before you start thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. We do career advice for each of the students as well. So we look at what they're trying to get out of the course, what their next goals are, and then give them the right feedback on what is missing or what they're ready for, the reality of what they're ready for when they leave, so that there's a good understanding of what they need to fill in the gaps before they can go and either find that role or go freelance or portfolio, whatever it is.
If you have to advise or if you have to give your suggestions on the books or the blogs or any other resources that anybody who wants to start learning design should start with, what will those be?
I like Sprint as a first starting point by Google. It's a really good one. Hooked, which is by Nir Eyal, about habit forming products. I personally like reading and listening to anything that's around entrepreneurship or building startups,
Right.
because a lot of also being a product designer, product manager is the mindset of creating products, and understanding failure is also important as well. Like there will be projects that you build that will be ultimately a waste of time because you haven't approached it right or done the right research, or just people won't need it. There'd be a lot of failure or constructive criticism and feedback that you need to be ready for. And it's really interesting listening to people who've created businesses or startups, like the amount of things they didn't do or that didn't work before they hit success. I've got a long list of books. I think it depends on what people have read and haven't read, but at the moment, I'd say Sprint, Hooked, Contagious, probably 3 that I recommend at the moment. Anything around lean UX, Jeff Gothelf, anything that he's written is good as well.
For the new designers, one mistake that I've seen them a lot making is that they place a lot of importance on the process versus the outcome. Like they become obsessed with this new process. So let's say you mentioned sprint, and if they don't have that sort of time, they would still push on doing a sprint even if it's not required. Similar is like, as you said, they would have gone to a meetup and they want to apply it. So this is especially true in terms of research, that the research with the users keeps on getting extended. Even the secondary research, there's never an end to it. So what do you think how should they limit the time for the research? Like how should they manage their time well, and how much research is actually the enough or the good research to get started?
Well, you're basically looking for enough insight to move forward with, and this is the biggest thing, is that is obviously showing that they're not thinking about constraints. Because in the real world, are you going to have unlimited time to go off and do research? No. You're going to be, you've got 2 days, you've got 5 days, but the client's going to give you budget for 5 days. So you've got to fit the research into 5 days. There will be some projects that I'll get where they'll be like, we only have 2 days to do research. We have to be really plan this really, really carefully, just because the budget's not there or the resources aren't there for any longer. So that is how you start to kind of figure out, what am I actually going to need from this research? What are my goals? What do I need? I have 2 days. What do I need to get from it? I don't have time to do a sprint. Maybe the next project I'll do a sprint. If we had 10 days, maybe we can do a sprint, right? There are a lot of people that are picking up sprint books and kind of saying we can apply it. I don't recommend that. It's more about learning the process. Just you have an understanding that this is something that you could go off and do for future projects. It doesn't mean you have to do it for every single project.
Right. Let's say if somebody has to ship a new feature or ship a new product, let's say ship a new product wireframes in the next 1 week. So how much time ideally they should be spending creating it versus testing it versus actually doing the initial bit of a research? So how do you think the time management should look like?
Well, if I had a week to kind of create something, ideally I want to get something into the hands of the users as soon as possible, even if it's sketches. So I would almost maybe do a day of research, based maybe going into it with some assumptions, and going into day 2 with the end goal to come out with a first set of sketches from day 2. Wednesday doing some testing. seeing how that goes, maybe spending a lot of the day as a testing. Depending on how many people are in the team, you could be feeding that back to them, and they could start digitizing some of the wireframes as well, of those sketches. It can really depend on what research has already been done, what assumptions you need to validate, how many people are in the team. This is where every process can be so different. But I'm very much like, I want to get something into the hands of the users as soon as possible to get feedback and see if this thing is working or if it solves their problem initially. And that way I can start to shape the product around their feedback.
Right. You conduct all these workshops, you're talking to so many students, meeting so many people. What is the biggest UX myth that you today want to, bust?
Well, I think most people think that it is fun. It is something that a lot of people should understand, but it's a lot of work. And I think sometimes people misunderstand how much work there is, especially on research, and that it's actually quite difficult to find the right people to speak to. So it's a lot of creativity, but it's a lot of work as well. It's not just always just designing. There is a huge element of research behind it that kind of helps you create those products. Even on our course, a 10-week course, you'd have 60 to 70 hours of homework on top of your class time, on top of your day work. Yeah. So it is a lot of work.
And what are your plans with Experience Haus for the next year?
So Experience Haus will continue to grow. We're getting a lot more corporate work coming in now as well. So corporates asking us for quite a bit of training. We'll be continuing to run courses and workshops, events, conferences, and international growth is on the radar for 2019. So we've got a partner in Barcelona, so we'll be running stuff in Barcelona in 2019. We're looking at India. We may do stuff in Ahmedabad in March. I'm not sure yet. And Toronto, where I'm from, is also maybe in the summer. So international growth is a big part of the plans as well.
That's amazing. Wish you all the luck, Amit. Where can our audience find you?
So our website is there's a couple of ways of contacting me or following or whatever. Experiencehaus.com is the website for all of our courses now. We are in London, but like I said, we are planning on doing international growth. We might even do like a road show and say come to India for like a week or two and do lots of different things out there. Very interested in doing that. LinkedIn, I can send my LinkedIn contact information. And Twitter is also a great place I always recommend to designers, get on Twitter, start using Twitter, follow people, because there's so much content being shared around for free. So it's worth getting on Twitter as well. And then I can send my email address as well.
Awesome. It was wonderful talking to you, and I obviously learned a lot, and I'm sure that anybody who's listening, they will learn a lot from your stories. Some really practical skills. Awesome. Thank you so much, Amit, for joining us today. Learned a lot from you and can't wait for you to be in India. Hopefully we'll be meeting soon on one of your road shows. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Amit, for joining us today. I'm sure there's a lot that community can learn from you. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you liked this episode. We are extremely curious to know what is your biggest takeaway. Leave a comment below and let us know. This is a weekly show, so make sure you subscribe. If you liked it, please share it with your friends and teammates. Keep learning, keep growing, and I will see you next time.